I'd first like to talk a bit about the carnivore diet and how it is useful for bodybuilding. Maybe we could go into like the bare basics, like about nutrition and stuff like that. So, what do you think about that? How do you find that it's useful for building muscles and maybe some amino acid
Yeah,
stuff? And
yeah. Well, I think the key thing about the carnivore diet is what it furnishes. At the end of the day, it's really macros and micros that are going to optimize muscle skeletal structures in the way they work. So if you're not getting enough of those things, or you're actually eating inappropriate foods that are going to impede the uptake of those nutrients, that's going to have deleterious effects on the physiology. Whether you like it or not, that is the reality. I mean, a lot of people will argue all sorts of things out there. I mean, I've seen a few of the colourful vagoons that you've basically looked at, trying to build muscle. I mean, really? On a vegan diet? On a, that's, as Bart Kay would call it, the Church of Anorexia Vegana. It's just devoid of, you know, the nutrients that a body requires. It's just ridiculous. I mean, most people know me. They know my hair grows like mad continuously. I have to cut it back. Obviously, I do have genetics that predispose me to alopecia and baldness. So a lot of my relatives have that. I don't have that problem. I've reversed a lot of that sort of issues. I was having my hair cut today and just talking with the actual, this is anecdotal evidence, obviously, but talking with my barber and his partner, she's Mongolian background. And he was talking about her grandfather, 110, and the guy just eats meat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you basically shakes your hand and you feel like you've basically just been squeezed. Yeah. So he goes, he's strong. And I go, that's the difference between animal products and all that. He says, yeah, I don't do all the thing the right way. And I actually said to him, look, I'm 57 this year. And he goes, he thought I was 40. And he goes, no bloody way. And I told him about how the importance about protein in hair quality. I mean, and also taurine plays or sulfurs in because one thing that animal foods are, they're rich in sulfur amino acids. Like methionine, like taurine, like all these sort of things that have that ability to bind keratin. So you end up with better nails, better skin, better hair, all over. You improve the collagen structures within your body. So, and you don't get and if you're eating an animal-based food, it's going to be more balanced in the amount of deuterium you get in the actual diet as well, which plays a big role. Too much, you end up with damaging your mitochondria and affecting your energy. And also you end up having too much, ends up in your collagen structures, which actually gives you that stiffness as you get older. You feel that stiffness because that's just deuterium accumulation in the collagen structures. So as you're damaging your mitochondria, less can actually be pulled in for oxidative phosphorylation. As a consequence, it ends up accumulating, then bioaccumulating inside the cells and building up. And that's where you get the reverse Krebs cycle that actually can then pull it in to produce more lactate. And that sort of goes into a senescent state of the cell and can move on to a cancerous state under certain circumstances. I mean, now they're talking about in Australia, 2 in 5 having cancer. It's a disaster. This is what seed oils and carbohydrates, which are high in deuterium, cause long term. They will basically push people's cellular structures towards senescence and potentially, under the right circumstances, to cancerous. So, let alone all the stiffness and all the other problems that you get. Not having too much, being too catabolic, like the vagoons, or people that do these really plant-based keto diets, they end up the other way, not enough protein. They end up not getting enough deuterium, because deuterium in protein is lower than sugars and the seed oils, but is slightly higher than the fats, which is good because that's what you want. You want in the collagen structures to have good strength, but not too much. to create stiffness. So
Mm.
this is what an animal-based diet, it actually gives you better muscle structure because you're eating foods which have the appropriate mix of deuterium in the 140 ppm, not in the 150 or 60, which is what you get in the carbohydrates. And the fats, they're in the middle range. So even at the what we could call the type of subatomic particles that are provided, that's part of the quantum biology, which we could go in later on, but we'll keep it simple for people. What you get from the actual food that can either be used to create ATP or can be used within cellular structures has to be within certain boundaries, within certain ranges. The energy part of animal foods is smack in the middle, especially if it's grass-fed or it's pastured, stuff like that. It's pretty much in the 115 ppm, which is between the 100. You don't want to be below 100 because that's when you don't have strong collagen structures, but you don't want to be above 130. That's a sweet spot. Animal fats are smack in the middle, with bacon being slightly less at about 113. When you feed the animal carbohydrates, seed oils or crap, what it does is it pushes the ppm into 120 odd, 122 at most, sometimes a bit higher. But even there, you're still in the sweet spot. You're not basically in the danger spot. And if that's all they can afford, they're still going to get energy, which is not going to be damaging. I usually do encourage people that have got cancer or stuff like that, which have got too much deuterium accumulation, to try and go for better quality fats, obviously, in that regard. But the ultimate thing is that what a carnivore diet would give you is a macronutrient composition that is ideal for the human body, and also a deuterium level, which is also proper. Also, it will keep your insulin to glucagon ratio at around about 1.3 plus, which means that you don't have excessive amounts of insulin, but at the same time, you don't need, because I've actually done a video showing that leucine is what drives muscle protein synthesis, not insulin. You can actually be fasted and still get muscle protein synthesis if you get enough leucine in.
Yes.
So that is a whole bunch of bollocks, as Ted would say. It's absolute bollocks for what people, argue. Oh, I need insulin. Yeah, just look at the current bodybuilders. Unlike the old ones who could live into their ripe old age of, that used to eat the steak and eggs and some dairy and stuff like that. They were living in their 90s and stuff like that, in the 80s, or, as long as they weren't dying from accidents or whatever else. But they were living, a lot of them were actually living in their 90s, and one of them actually died recently, a British guy who changed his diet at 95 for whatever reason, started doing marathons, which is contraindicated, and not weightlifting, and stopped competing, and went on a more plant-based diet for 3 years, and at 98 dropped dead. Say no more. Another bodybuilder years ago, I forget his name, he basically ended up dying in his 70s, but not from any disease or anything like that. He was, and this was back quite a few years back in the, I think in the 70s or 80s, he was lifting actually, and back then, things like fridges and stuff like that, this was a washing machine, but I believe, these are heavy things. And he was lifting that in his 70s up the stairs. He slipped and it crushed him. But, we're talking about now 70-year-old, a mid-70-year-old. I think he was 76. And then you're talking about this guy that, cut my hair today and goes, Harry, my father-in-law, 110. And he could shake your hand and you could feel the grip, a strong grip. And he goes, yeah, it makes sense, because we were talking about some of this sort of stuff. And he goes, and I go, look, you got to eat more animal foods. You will feel stronger and better for it. Take the example of your grandfather-in-law or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because, people compare the diets. People in the vegan space, the vegan bodybuilding space, they say, I still get my protein because it matches what you'd eat on a standard Western diet or on a carnivore diet.
Yep,
You went to a really good point there. And people just looking at the numbers on a calculator, they don't look at the actual micronutrients, the antinutrients,
precisely.
the deuterium.
Exactly. They're not looking at
Explains
any
it
of this
very
sort of
well.
stuff. Yeah,
They don't
they're
go into the
missing.
stuff.
Yeah, they're
Mm,
missing all these nuances that are so important for the actual functioning. You know, in that regard, I'll give you an example. They will not get enough in some sense methionine in some cases, or they won't get enough leucine, or they won't get enough arginine because these are more higher in animal foods. You know, and I know that they've got these funny sort of vagunarized supplements that they've got out there, but a lot of them are full of, because they're soya based or whatever else, they're full of anti
mm.
nutrients. They're horrendous. What they do to the endocrine system, the hormonal system, and many other functionings of the body, let alone they tend to be much higher. So if you actually have, let's say, you do a whey supplement. Now, a whey supplement comes from an animal product that will have a lower level of deuterium around about the 140 odd mark. You get one of these soy, whatever, they're already, the actual soy crap and all that is already in the 150 odd. Process it, you're pushing it to 170. The closer you get to 180, that's a danger zone.
Mm.
And when you get over like seed oils are 255 parts per million, well, goodbye. It's really just you're killing your mitochondria. You're killing your ability to produce energy. And as the mitochondria decline in density, so inside, all those folds that you have, the actual mitochondria, there are electron chains on each side, and you've got a protein gradient that actually builds up there. The complexes pump through the protons, and then as that gradient increases, then it pushes against the ATPase, which is at nanomotor, the complex 5 that just rotates at up to 9,000 RPM. But if you're putting neutrons through, because that's what deuterium does, it's got an additional neutron in its nucleus rather than just a proton, so it's called 2H as well in scientific terms, that will actually slow down or bust those motors if there are too many neutrons coming through. And the more of those motors you bust, the less energy you have over time. The less energy you have over time, the less capacity to heal you have over time. That's a problem. Now,
So,
what does an animal
yeah.
food give you when it comes to mitochondrial health? Well, it actually, when you've got there are a number of, there are 3 type of ATPase in the system. One of them, which is the V type, that actually helps a number of organelles inside the cytoplasm, inside the cell, plays a critical role in cleaning up the junk, so to speak. Very important to clean out the crap out of that. What does that require? Leucine and arginine. If leucine does the critical part, but if you don't have enough arginine, you've got a problem. You basically then, what is it called? Castor 1 then ends up inhibiting Castor 2, which one affects the other. And so if you do that, and that is a consequence of not having enough arginine. So immediately an animal-based food will give you sufficient leucine and arginine to allow even for cellular cleanup to happen, which is critically important. So for bodybuilders that are actually causing a lot of oxidative stress, a lot of, they're lifting a lot of weights and stuff like that, if you don't have quality protein, you're not going to get these macronutrients in the right composition that you require so your cellular functions can improve, but also the cleaning up of those cellular functions. Also, you're not going to get enough taurine. What does taurine do? Well, taurine inhibits lactate. So through the actual, as you're going through glycolysis, when you get to pyruvate, you can either go back through lactate, and that lactate then being produced will go all the way back to the liver, get repackaged as either glycogen or glucose to be sent back to the periphery or to other parts of the body, obviously the brain or anywhere else that it's needed. But we're just talking about the periphery now, which is the musculoskeletal part. So that will go back. But at the same time, what taurine will do is minimize the amount of lactate and force it through the Krebs cycle and oxidize it, which really means you're also reducing the amount and also deal with the reactive oxygen species that come from that, but also lowering the amount of lactate as well. So, which is critically important because it actually improves the actual functioning of the muscles as well. It means you can go for longer as well when you're exercising. So I usually say to people, well, if you're a smaller frame, about 45 minutes, taking a couple of grams of taurine. If you're about middle frame, about a bit over an hour. And if you're a big person like yourself, Jonathan, you're probably looking at about 90 odd minutes. So you can actually saturate your whole body with taurine, which will basically reduce some of that oxidative stress, reduce the lactate, oxidize it, use it, and actually force you into a state where you can, one, perform for slightly longer to enhance protein synthesis after the recovery, but at the same time, you can also keep down the amount of oxidative stress in the mitochondria, which is really important to maintain mitochondrial health for long-term abilities to basically heal and get the advantages of the bodybuilding that you're doing as well.
Yeah, I like that. And what I'm seeing nowadays in bodybuilding is, of course, with a lot of recent deaths, one of my bodybuilding idols, maybe a year ago, he died, Cedric McMillan. And lots of other people have died recently as well. You know, insulin, definitely. Diuretics,
it's killing
all sorts
them.
of things.
It's killing them.
Cancer, heart attacks, all sorts of things.
Yeah,
it's interesting you say all this because they're now becoming more health conscious.
Issues. What else is happening with heart issues? Left ventricular hypertrophy.
Yeah.
What does taurine do? It inhibits it. And it maintains the right modeling of your heart so you don't get this problem. So when you're eating animal based and you're not eating just basically soy crap and whatever else, again, it comes back to eating the animal foods. You're going to get more taurine that way. You're not going to get it from a pure powder. Well, you can use a powder as additional bulking material, but it's not going to, you still have to eat quite a lot of meat, animal foods, or, seafood or whatever that's got even more taurine than so combine some elements of seafood as well. You need those foods because those foods will give you the additional nutrients that don't exist in powders. And vegans, they can't get taurine in plant foods, and in their powders, it doesn't exist either, unless it's put in there as a supplement. And most of them are completely ignorant about it as well.
Definitely when it comes to taurine. What I'm seeing now is because of all the health problems that have come about in recent years, they are more health conscious now. They're not making the right actions to prevent the health problems themselves. So what they're doing is they're having injectable glutathione. They're sort of adding more things to the mix rather than just changing the diet itself, which is what's causing the problem.
Do you know the glutathione supplementation doesn't really work?
Yeah, it doesn't do a lot.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a misnomer, that one. It's a bit of an odd one. Yeah.
So what can one say? It's actually, if you eat the nutrients that actually produce intracellular antioxidants like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, or catalase, it's really eating the animal foods that are going to give you the nutrients to build those things. And when you've got lower insulin, you can actually produce within your own body. It's an excess insulin that also can affect negatively intracellular antioxidants. So on top of that, they're increasing their oxidative stress, and in recovery, they can't actually reduce that oxidative stress because they're not having the nutrients that can do that. As a consequence, they do more damage, accumulative damage, where a carnivore bodybuilder will actually have the nutrients to reduce that oxidative stress and actually heal better. Their mitochondria work better. Everything works better.
Yeah, it makes more sense. It does come down to essentially the mitochondrial level. How do you fix it? And the carnivore diet does just that.
Exactly.
It's the big key here, I think.